Hello and welcome to Why We Are Christians. This is the first part of a two-part series. Both of them are going to be with Ann Asher, and this is Ann.
Hi, Ken. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, we're glad to have you. We're the first half of the program, the first half-hour show. We're going to talk about how it is that you started believing in Jesus. Mm-hmm. And that's where we're going to go, the first part, and then the second part, we're going to talk about, well, what happened after that. So we're glad you could be with us. We just happened to get you in time before you went on your cruise, Ann. So I know you were born in St. Louis, Missouri. Tell us, when was that? What year were you? You don't mind the year?
I don't mind at all. Okay. 1956.
56, okay. I was delivering fuller brushes for my dad at the time, but okay. So there you are, and tell us a little bit about your parents.
Well, my parents were raised in the Midwest in Kansas City, and they were both raised in very traditional, conservative backgrounds, Jewish backgrounds, and they were part of an extended family that was really very observant about all the holidays and including family and having joyous celebrations and solemn occasions. And
so your last name is Asher, mm-hmm. One of the 12 tribes of Israel, and I think your mother's maiden name was Cohen.
That's right.
That's right. Okay, your mom. I've met your mom, and so that's the priest, the Kohen, and so there you are in St. Louis, and you left there pretty quickly.
When I was 6 weeks old, my parents...
So you don't have a lot of vivid memories of St. Louis?
No, not at that age.
Not at that age. So where'd you go? Well, you guys moved?
We relocated to Vallejo, California, specifically Mare Island, where my dad was stationed for his naval service, and he was a fledgling physician at the time. And they fell in love with the West Coast and decided they wanted to make their lives and their family's life there.
So you lived at Mare Island. I've been through there many times. So here you are. Did you go to, was it a conservative, reformed, orthodox?
And my father had his medical training, and he felt that his knowledge as a scientist, practitioner, was in conflict with the religious beliefs that he was so well educated in and trained in.
All right.
So we didn't really attend a synagogue there. I believe they went on occasion to the most significant Jewish holidays and festivals, but as time went on, their observance of Judaism really dwindled.
How old are you when you were at Mare Island there then?
Oh, I'd say about 1 to 2 years old.
Oh, just still a little bitty kid.
Yeah.
So where'd you go after Mare Island?
Then Daly City for a time when my father started his career.
Now, for people that don't know, Daly City is just south of San Francisco.
Right.
So, and he set up a medical practice?
Yes, he did, and then he went with Kaiser Permanente in the Bay Area. Okay. And he changed specialties later on and became a pathologist.
Now, what's a pathologist do?
A pathologist examines surgical section samples when somebody's suspected of having a cancer or other disease. They diagnose. They also do, I can't think of the word, post-mortem exams, okay. Autopsies.
Autopsies. I was wondering. Okay. We like, my wife and I like Dr. Blake, one of the Australian mysteries, and he did that. That's what he did. So where'd you go to high school?
I went to Lowell High School in San Francisco.
One of the famous high schools in the city, right?
Right.
Okay. And so what was life like at Lowell? What kind of a kid were you? Did you do sports? Were you academics were big? Well, tell us about your high school stuff.
High school was tough. It was very, very competitive. You had to perform at a certain level to even get into the school. It was like applying to a college or university. You had to meet a certain standard, and the competition was really ferocious. However, when I applied for college and started my freshman year in college, I found that the coursework was refreshingly easy compared to my last years of high school.
And you went to San Francisco State.
Right.
And your major was?
Psychology.
Now, see, we have a lot of connection there because I went to Sacramento State, also part of the state college system, and my bachelor's degree was in psychology as well. And so there's kind of interesting overlap there. Then when you got out of college, what happened there?
Well, during my last semester at college, I developed a very debilitating and what turned out to be chronic neuromuscular disease, and was really quite incapacitated by that initially. In fact, I used a wheelchair for a number of years after that. So my goal of entering a doctoral program in psychology was delayed because of the physical rehabilitation I needed.
You came here with a crutch, and we've known you for years now, Anne, and we know your struggles with all of that has been a big deal. But you got your doctorate at the California School of Professional Psychology.
In
and
Alameda.
you worked as a therapist.
I sure did. I went away to finish my doctoral training, my last internship in Dallas at the Dallas VA Medical Center. And then after a couple of years, I returned to the Bay Area because I missed my family.
Yes, okay. So let me ask you, so you're in a, like your dad a little bit, a bit of a scientific area of study. And what were your concepts of God? Did you have any ideas there? Or?
Well, I was raised in a household where there was conversation about there being no God, that God really could not exist, and that phenomenon, as it was called, just wasn't supported by the evidence. And so I was really steeped in that. But once I proceeded through my education, I started believing that the notion of God and the experience of God was entirely compatible with science. And
you felt that it was?
I did.
So you held out the idea that there maybe is somebody out there or something out there. You weren't attending any groups, any spiritual groups?
Well, I started to attend a local synagogue and became very close friends with a rabbi at that small extended family synagogue. And I really enjoyed it a lot. I wasn't very knowledgeable at all about Judaism, traditional Judaism, kind of was steeped in my family's ideas of what Judaism was about and how to celebrate Passover and Hanukkah, which were really not that consistent with more observant practices in Judaism.
Was that, now, so it was Reformed?
I would say Reform, or not even, you mean the synagogue I attended? It was conservative.
Oh, it was conservative, okay.
Yes.
So you had a God concept of some kind.
It became stronger and stronger as I went along.
Now, during that time, what did you think about Christians? Did you ever run into any Christians?
Most of my friends were Christians, and really devout Christians.
Huh.
And I have to say that I was very envious of these folks because they seemed really solid in their belief systems and their practices, and they were rooted, and their families were rooted in Christianity. So I had friends who were Catholics, Protestants, other religions, other faiths. I had some Jewish friends as well.
Any wild-eyed Pentecostal Christians?
Not until I went to Texas.
He went to Texas. Okay, I think that's coming up in our. That's going to come up. I mean, people like me. I don't know how wild-eyed I am, but I have been in lots of different segments of Christianity. But so you did encounter. Did any of them try to tell you about Jesus?
Yes, there was a household staff, a house cleaner, who was a black woman, very elderly by the time I really had these conversations with her, and she would say to me, "Anne, you've got to believe. He is the Lord, and you just have to take him into your heart and pray to Jesus, pray to Jesus." And I was always kind of puzzled by what she said, but she was so vibrant and alive and solid in her faith. I was envious of her as well.
Do you remember her name?
Ruth McLennan.
Okay, Ruth, and that was in San Francisco.
That was in San Francisco.
So you did have this very early contact with someone who was a Christian. And did anything come of that?
Well, I had a very long-standing relationship with her. She actually was an attendant for me after my disability began, and so I knew her from the time I was about, I'd say 7-ish, till the time I was 26, 27. So it was a long relationship, so there were many small moments with her, and
Yes.
I remember them vividly. And she was someone I really loved and admired greatly.
Okay. Well, so you got your doctorate, and what did you do after that? How did you apply it?
Well, once my disability began, I went from wanting to be a general practitioner in psychology to being a medical psychologist or rehab psychologist. And so that was my area of concentration in psychology, and what brought me to the Texas VA Medical Center in Dallas.
The Texas? No, you got hired there.
I was hired there for my final year of internship.
I see.
And it was a very exciting, wonderful opportunity. People would come from all over the country to seize that opportunity if offered.
Really? So a VA hospital, was that what it was?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a veteran myself,
Mm-hmm.
and so you would have been dealing with people who perhaps had needed therapy coming out of the World War II, not Vietnam yet, but the Korean conflict.
In Vietnam, and even the Gulf War.
Oh, I see. Okay, you were there. You were there that long, so you were working there
for a couple of years, and this was back in '97 through '99.
Oh, okay. I missed a little bit of a time frame here. I think you had a few years gobbled up by your disability.
Partly that, and then I had about 5 or 6 years of pre-doctoral internships that I pursued.
Oh, I see.
And those, due to the requirements of the field, you have to get a really wide base of experience in clinical settings. So I worked with children, adolescents, adults, elderly folks, people with disabilities, severely, chronically, mentally ill adults, the whole gamut.
The whole thing. Wow, what a background. I never knew, Anne, about that. We talked about that at a point or two, but I didn't realize that it really ran that deep. That you've got an incredible background in those areas. Now, during that period of time, did you ever go to a church?
I went for rituals or special events, occasions. I occasionally went to a mass. I, in college, dated a Catholic fellow, and our debates about religion really tore us apart. It was really a very, it was a heartbreaking situation.
Really? What was the nature of the conflict? Can you think of, remember anything?
Oh, I remember it well. He was from a very devout Catholic family, and we talked about getting married, and he, of course, knew about my Jewish background, and the two families exerted pressure on the two of us, and we were in our early to mid-20s at the time, and it eventually fractured our relationship. And the irony is that I converted to Christianity, became a Messianic Jew. So things came full circle.
That's interesting. So the contacts that you had with Christianity at that time essentially had to do with this young man.
And friends' weddings, an occasional funeral. I went to a midnight mass at the French American church in downtown San Francisco with some friends of mine who were Catholic. I think it was St. Anne's. I'm not sure of the name of the church, but it was a beautiful mass.
Did you have much of an idea who Jesus was at that time?
Well, my family had always taught me that Jesus was an amazing man and a prophet and somebody whose memory was to be respected and, if not revered, not taken lightly and not dismissed, but any notion of him being the Messiah was really discounted. And the possibility of my even reading the New Testament that wasn't even on the table.
Now, did you have a Bible?
Yes, I did. Our family had a lot of Jewish literature. My father was a really fine Jewish scholar as a young man before he went to college and medical school. And I still have some of his most treasured books on Judaism and Israel, which was just becoming a state at around that time, or was to become a state.
So Jesus was revered, honored to a degree, but not to the point of what Christians believe about Jesus. Did you feel any attraction to Jesus? What was going on with you?
I did. As I mentioned, I felt real envy, and then when I was in this relationship as a young adult, I really asked my parents, well, what would the harm be in my converting to Catholicism in order to make a life with this fine young man? And that was really frowned upon, to going that far with it. So.
This is kind of a weird thing. I didn't think of asking this, but did you ever, did you know who Billy Graham was?
Of course I did.
Okay.
Of course
Did
I
you ever
did.
hear a sermon by Billy Graham?
Never.
Never, okay.
I saw little snippets on TV, but never a full sermon.
Did you ever hear a Christian sermon during that period?
Not a full one. Not until I went to Dallas did I hear one.
Okay. I think we better go to Dallas. Okay, and I've heard you talk about Carol and Robert. Tell me about these people.
Well, I met Carol through my VA internship, and we became fast friends, and I met her husband, and so we socialized a lot, and as the relationship deepened, we talked more and more about about their faith, and my lack thereof, and my confusion about it. I felt very much by that time, having been well into my disability, that traditional Judaism left me thirsty for something more. And we talked about that a lot, but when I was asked why couldn't I entertain going there, I would respond that, well, that's just not how I was raised, that's not who I am. It's such a leap, it would be such a leap. I don't I didn't think that that was conceivable. And so the more we talked, and the more I read some of the books that they turned me on to, the more compelling I felt it was.
Can you remember any of the books they gave you?
Evidence that calls for a verdict.
Evidence that demands a verdict.
That demands a verdict.
I can't remember whose name. I know the book.
He's written a series, and
Yes.
I've read a couple of them, and it was eye-opening for me.
Okay.
Eye-opening. But it was still very much a theory for me. It was still an intellectual kind of notion that, well, this isn't how I was raised, and this isn't where I am, and I'm Jewish, therefore I can't believe in Jesus as the Messiah.
Did you try to read the New Testament at all, Anne?
I would read passages. I had read during long bouts of illness, I would read the Psalms and the Proverbs, and of course I read the story of Job, and repeatedly. And so the more interested I was in this idea, the more I read in the Old Testament, the Torah, and the more I read in the New Testament.
Did you ever think that this was a strange God that would make you so ill?
Well, there had been a lot of family tragedy in my family, a lot of people who had contracted cancer at an early age, and my father himself died at the age of 53 from cancer. And so in my family circle, there was the belief that if there really was a God, God wouldn't be so cruel as to unleash these terrible tragedies on our family, which I had a problem with because I was really struggling emotionally and spiritually as I got into my disability, and I just felt that there had to be something more that really resonated with me as a person.
Okay. So you're well into your disability when you're in Dallas. And you're dealing with some issues around that. So how did they talk to you about Jesus? Did they say to you, and you're a guilty sinner?
Never.
Never. Now I would have.
Well, that's not how they approached it, but they did.
They were a little bit different.
They did say, if you want to go to heaven upon your death in this world, you'll need to accept Jesus as your Savior.
Did you ever hear the words, "For all have sinned"?
Yes, of course.
Did they tell you that?
Yes, and they said that they'd sinned themselves.
Okay. So, when I like to define with the gospel message, the core gospel message is the law plus grace equals salvation. That we stand guilty before God. Did you ever have a sense of your own sin?
Oh, yes.
You did?
Yes, I did.
Tell me a little bit about that. Because that's a key deal. That's a key deal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was aware that I had many failings, some really pretty miserable failings. I mean, I never murdered anybody or physically abused anybody, but I could have quite a temper and say things that were hurtful, and at the time meaning to say them, but later regretting them. And in the Jewish tradition, one atones for one's sins at the Jewish New Year. And it seemed to me that once a year didn't do it in my case. That's good, Anne. So you did have a very straightforward idea that something was wrong. You may not have been able to put your finger on it,
but there was something inside that was not right.
And
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm just, wondering if.
I felt unsatisfied, and that I could not fully address my failings and gain fulfillment of my strengths in my existing way of worshiping, when I worshiped, when I prayed.
Okay.
And when Carol and Robert and I would pray together, there was something that was very uplifting, and I can't really put it quite into words, but I felt a connection and was starting to experience that I was feeling a connection with a God.
Okay.
A God. I didn't, but poorly defined.
Poorly defined. Okay. That happens to many folks. It's sort of the long, slow calling. Did you go to church with Carol and Robert?
No, I didn't, but I did visit a Baptist church that was right across the street from the VA Medical Center.
Oh, not a Baptist church.
A Baptist church,
Oh,
can you believe
goodness.
it?
Oh.
And it was an all-black Baptist church, almost completely black, and the style of worship was so full of praise and joy, and I had never experienced anything like it. I was treated so warmly and with such welcome, and it was something I will never forget.
We're going to take a little break.
Okay.
We're going to come back a little bit, and we're going to do another program on what happened